The Michael Jordan-led Chicago Bulls were dominant in the 1990s. This decade really cemented Michael Jordan's legacy as being called the GOAT by countless people. All this despite number 23 retiring twice and being away from the game for almost 3 NBA seasons in the 90s. So what about those Chicago Bulls teams that were Jordan-less? 90 Sports Assault presents the Chicago Bulls in the 90s without Michael Jordan. The Chicago Bulls completed the first three-peat after defeating the Phoenix Suns on June 20th, 1993. For the following October, Michael Jordan shockingly announced his first retirement, mentioning the desire is just not there anymore. Subsequently, in another shocking move, Jordan signed a minor league contract with the Chicago White Sox and then reported to spring training. As for the 1993-1994 Bulls, Chicago still had one of the best players in the world in Scottie Pippen. The Bulls would also have their starting center in Bill Cartwright returning and one of the better defensive power forwards in Horace Grant coming back. In the backcourt, B.J. Armstrong took over as a starting point guard during the previous year and was on his way to becoming an all-star. Pete Myers would be replacing Jordan as a Bulls starting shooting guard, as Myers had an interesting path to finally become an NBA starter. The bench would still have a lot of experience that took part in the Bulls' first three-peat, and players like Stacey King, Scott Williams, Will Perdue, and John Paxson. Chicago would also be welcoming some key new players like the multi-skilled 6'11" Tony Kukoc, who was drafted by the Bulls in 1990, would finally report to Chicago for the 93-94 season. Other signings included one of the greatest three-point shooters ever in Steve Kerr and Bill Wennington, which was a very underrated signing to be a center coming off the bench. Heading into the 1993-1994 season, I thought the Bulls might struggle a bit. As aforementioned, Pippen was one of the best basketball players in the world, a tremendous all-around talent. On the other hand, I felt he wasn't a great isolation scorer, someone who could create space off the dribble, go one-on-one when the offense would break down, someone you could go to when you really needed a bucket. I thought this would be a problem with Jordan gone, but I would be wrong. The Bulls started the 93-94 season in not an ideal way with a 4-7 record. Two reasons for this. First, Pippen would miss the first 10 of 12 games due to an ankle injury, and second, every November the Bulls go on a lengthy road trip because the Ringling Brothers Traveling Circus would come to the Windy City and use Chicago Stadium, and thus, it's not easy going on a road trip while playing the likes of Seattle, Houston, Portland, and San Antonio. But Pippen would return. The Bulls would go on a 10-game winning streak in December and a 7-game winning streak in January. Included in this time period were 3 buzzer beaters by Tony Kukoc. Going into the All-Star break, the Bulls would be 34-13, tied for the best record in the East with the surprising Atlanta Hawks, and link below for my video about this team. But anyways, back to the Bulls, who before the trade deadline, GM Jerry Krause made a sneaky underrated trade. With Bill Cartwright nearing the end of his career with sore knees and a bad back, and Will Perdue having injury problems this season, Krause traded Stacey King to the Timberwolves for Luke Longley and a second-round pick. This was a great trade as King was only averaging about 17 minutes per game, and Luke Longley would then become the starting center for the Bulls during their next three-peat. As for the rest of the team, the 1993-1994 Chicago Bulls would finish the regular season with a 55-27 record. That's only 2 losses less than the previous season with Michael Jordan. I think the Bulls exceeded expectations greatly. So what happened? How did the Bulls almost become the top team in the East without Michael Jordan? First of all, Scottie Pippen, Horace Grant, and B.J. Armstrong stepped up. Pippen played at an MVP caliber level, while Grant and Armstrong were named All-Stars for the first and only times in their career. Second, I mentioned earlier that I thought Pippen was not a great player in regards to isolation, going off the dribble and creating his own shot. However, he was perfect for the triangle offense. Pippen, who was a point forward, was very good at these staples of the triangle offense, which includes making decisions on a pick and roll or a pick and pop. Pippen was also very good at pinch post action, which is the action you see here. He was very good at reading how the defense plays him on screens and getting open for outside shots, and very good at scoring in the post, in which a triangle offense offers several opportunities for. Furthermore, this Bulls team had the personnel to fit the triangle. I mentioned about Pippen's versatility, but the 6'11" Tony Kukoc could also shoot from the outside, handle the ball, pass effectively, and cut. Cartwright and Grant were quite experienced in playing in the system, and Grant was a very effective mid-range shooter for a power forward back then. B.J. Armstrong and Steve Kerr's strength is their outside shooting and didn't have to play the point. They could get their shots naturally in the triangle and play off the ball. Wennington and Longley were very good passers in the post. Longley could also score in the post with a hook from either his left hand or his right hand, and Bill Wennington was an exceptional mid-range shooter for a big man back then, as he could surprisingly come off screens and shoot his mid-range shot. Lastly, the triangle is not the easiest system because spacing is important. You need players who can understand how to balance the floor and how to go to certain spots and know when to initiate the offense. This Bulls team was very smart. With all this said, how would this team fare in the playoffs? The Bulls swept the first round series against the Cavs. Next up would be another classic series with the rivals, the New York Knicks. New York won the first 2 games at Madison Square Garden. The big issue was in the fourth quarter. Game 3 was a fascinating game, as a melee erupted between the Knicks starting point guard Derek Harper and the Bulls backup guard JoJo English. This altercation moved in the first few rows of the crowd right in front of NBA Commissioner David Stern. But there was more to come in Game 3. With seconds winding down, the Bulls up 2. Pippen tried to isolate on Anthony Mason, but couldn't create any space and threw up a wild heave that got all backboard. With 5.5 seconds left, Patrick Ewing tied up the game, and then 1.8 seconds were remaining. Phil Jackson drew up a play for Tony Kukoc, with Pippen being a decoy. Pippen was extremely upset, which led to Pippen benching himself for the final play. Kukoc once again hit a game winner at the buzzer. The Bulls were only down 2-1 and not 3-0. The Bulls would win Game 4 to tie up the series. Game 5 would be back at the Garden, and of course more drama would come. With seconds remaining, the Bulls were up by a point, and one defensive stand could give the Bulls a 3-2 lead going back to Chicago. Knicks guard Hubert Davis took a shot that missed. However, a controversial foul was called by Hugh Hollins on Pippen, who contested the shot. Yes, Pippen touched Davis's arm, but he did so after the shot was released. Should this foul have been called? Nonetheless, Davis hit the free throws and New York won. The Bulls would take Game 6, but in Game 7, the Bulls had their lowest scoring output in the series, and thus the Knicks won and would wind up representing the East in the NBA Finals. For the 1994-1995 NBA season, things would be quite different in Chicago, and it started with the new stadium. Horace Grant would sign with the Magic, and Bill Cartwright signed with Seattle. Scott Williams signed with the Philadelphia 76ers, and John Paxson retired. The Bulls would sign guard Ron Harper, who would become a much different player than his days with the Cavs and the Clippers. He nicely found his place with this team, despite fewer minutes and maybe skills diminishing due to previous knee injuries, but he was a solid player on defense. Lastly, the Bulls also signed Judd Buechler. Before Chicago's annual November Circus road trip, the Bulls started 3-3, and there is one game in the span that has always fascinated me that I'd like to talk about, and that is this loss to the Dallas Mavericks. The Mavericks had a really nice young core, but they were just absolutely brutal the previous 2 seasons. In this game, Scottie Pippen did not have a good game defensively, as Jamal Mashburn scored 50 and Jim Jackson scored 38. This game has always stuck in my mind, as this was like a bad omen for what was to come. For most of the season, Chicago would be around the 500 mark, at most 3 games under 500. The changes to the roster may have been the cause for the decline, but Scottie Pippen was not happy this season. Pippen would start to be melting down. This is all from NBCSports.com, an article by Jack M. Silverstein. During the season, Pippen was ejected twice. One of those ejections included a major eruption with a chair-throwing incident. Furthermore, it's been well known about Pippen being at odds with the Bulls front office, especially GM Jerry Krause. Pippen was not happy, as he thought the Bulls tried to trade him behind his back during the previous offseason. Moreover, Pippen had 3 more years on a 7-year, $18 million contract, but was seen as very much underpaid. Throughout the season, Pippen went public on air, saying he hopes he is traded. Even if his contract was renegotiated, he said he wanted to go play somewhere else. The rumors were swirling of Pippen going to several teams. However, the trade deadline of February 23 passed and Pippen was still a Bull. The Bulls would play a little better basketball and be going 34-31 around mid-March. And this happened. A fax surfaced and Michael Jordan letting the world know he's coming back. Leading up to this fax, Jordan was showing up to the team's practice facility periodically, so there was some speculation about a Jordan comeback. For Jordan's first game back, the Bulls lost at Indiana, as number 45 at this time showed the rust, but Chicago had finished strong, going 13-3 in their last 16 games. A couple of memorable moments occurred when Jordan hit a buzzer beater to defeat Atlanta, and Jordan going for 55 against the Knicks in his return to Madison Square Garden. For the playoffs, Chicago took care of Charlotte. Next up, the talented Orlando Magic. In Game 1, with 10 seconds left, Nick Anderson stole the ball from Jordan to set up the game winner to Horace Grant as the Magic won, After the game, Anderson said this: "He didn't look like the old Michael Jordan. Number 45 doesn't explode like number 23 used to." This prompted Jordan to switch back to number 23 as the Bulls won Game 2, but the Bulls lost the series to the eventual Eastern Conference champs. However, you know what happened for the next 3 seasons. Jordan retired once more following the 1997-1998 season, and the dismantling of the dynasty occurred as Phil Jackson resigned as head coach. Pippen was traded to the Houston Rockets, Dennis Rodman left for the Lakers, Luke Longley was shipped to the Phoenix Suns, and Steve Kerr signed with the San Antonio Spurs. For the 98-99 season, an NBA lockout resulted in the NBA being played in a packed 50-game schedule. Tim Floyd, who did some good things at Iowa State and I thought was a very solid tactical coach, led the Bulls to a 13-37 record, which I think was pretty good considering the roster he had to work with. But nonetheless, it was clearly the end of one of the greatest dynasties ever in sports, and the Bulls would struggle in the coming years. The 1993-1994 Chicago Bulls had 55 wins despite not having number 23. Even though Scottie Pippen had higher win share totals in other seasons, I thought this was his best season and really showcased what he was able to do without Michael Jordan. However, the 94-95 season was a tumultuous year for Pippen and the Bulls, but had a plentiful amount of excitement before Chicago had another three-peat in the following years. But after dismantling the Chicago Bulls dynasty, some dark years would be on the horizon for Chicago. The Chicago Bulls in the 90s without Michael Jordan. Thank you so much for watching this 90s sports video. Check out the links below like Patreon. Thank you so much.